So what do you do when it seems like your body is trying to stop you from doing the thing that you know you were put on this earth to do? I guess outsmart it.
Hail science!
What's up, YouTube? Jason here. Like, subscribe, do all the things. So it's been a minute since my last video. I try to stay on a little bit of a schedule with making these, but I had to take a couple of weeks off because I've been dealing with a medical issue recently. So you may have heard me mention before on the channel that I deal with eczema, a non-contagious skin irritation in my hands. The medical community doesn't really know what causes eczema, so they don't really know how to fully get rid of it. The best you can do is just manage the symptoms. And recently my eczema has gotten worse than it ever has been. And the worst part about this whole experience is that I'm not exactly in a financial place where I can just take a few weeks off from making music. I have to keep working in order to pay the bills and provide. And so there have been moments where I've had to play gigs and just fight through the pain, basically. So where I'm at now, I'm doing a lot better. I'm dealing with it day to day. I'm going to see a dermatologist. We're going to run some tests to find out what I'm allergic to that could be encouraging these eczema reactions. And I'm really thankful that it's localized to my hands. I'm not dealing with eczema anywhere else on my body. But this has meant I've had to make some adjustments to my life as a guitar player. I've severely increased the amount of gloves in my life. I wear gloves when I wash dishes or cook or do around the house things. I even sleep wearing cotton gloves to try to keep as much moisture in and irritants and bacteria out of my hands as possible. I even recently invested in a specialized glove made specifically for playing the guitar to deal with the newfound sensitivity in my fingertips. But I think the biggest and maybe most insane part of this whole process has been the potential discovery that my skin might be allergic to nickel. You know, nickel, the thing guitar strings are made of. It seems crazy, me, a guy who consistently gets paid to play the guitar, develops a skin condition where he can't touch guitar strings. That'd be like, I don't know, a marine biologist being allergic to water. Like, sure, technically you can still do the job, but things just got infinitely more complicated. Now, no test has officially confirmed a nickel allergy yet, but in noticing where the eczema affects my hands, the placement was eerily consistent with where my hands come into contact with the strings, even down to where sometimes I reach around my left thumb to fret the low E string, and that was the only spot on my left thumb that I had serious eczema. But thank God I am not the only person with potentially a nickel allergy to play the guitar, so a lot of string manufacturers have caught up to this. So I did some research on guitar strings that don't have any nickel in them, and it turns out my favorite guitar string maker, Ernie Ball, makes a couple of different types of strings that are nickel free. So I decided to go with cobalt strings. So I grabbed a couple of sets of Ernie Ball cobalt strings from my local guitar store. I put them on my Starcaster and I tried them out in church. I didn't hate the way they felt or sounded, and as far as I can tell, my skin reacts a lot better to them. That, with all the other care and routines I've been doing for my hands, has made my eczema much more manageable. And the interesting thing about the cobalt strings is, to me, they have a slightly looser feel than the normal nickel strings that I'm used to, and increased output due to the higher magnetic properties of the material. So it's felt a little bit like I've been relearning how to play the guitar. So I decided cobalt strings were a good idea, so I'm switching over all of my electric guitars. I don't have to worry about my acoustic. Acoustic guitar strings don't have nickel in them. They use phosphor bronze, which, as far as I can tell, is not a problem. So I thought today I'd share a couple of practical tips on how I change my guitar strings. I have a few different kinds of guitars. I string them up a little differently. I'm going to go through all of them to show how I set them up to play really well. So let's start with my Les Paul. My Strat and my Starcaster I've already restrung, and there's nothing I do on them that you won't see elsewhere in this video. So first we take the old strings off. You can see I'm wearing these vinyl gloves because of the nickel. Usually it's fastest to just loosen the strings so they don't fly away, and just cut them in the middle with my string clippers and then just pull them out of each end with pliers. I typically have some kind of recyclable container next to me to throw the old strings in, especially on a big job like this. Now, I haven't cleaned the fretboard in a while, so I'm going to do that. I just have some basic fretboard oil and use a polish cloth to spread it out if the neck feels particularly dry. Let it soak in for a second, then I lightly brush with steel wool to get any buildup out. I also go ahead and get the dust off of the headstock and under where the strings are using a polish cloth and some guitar polish. Now typically I use 10 gauge strings, that's my standard, but on the Les Paul I like slightly heavier strings. One, because I typically tune this guitar down a half or a whole step, and two, because I use this guitar to play a lot of slide on, and the heavier strings for me are really more conducive to that. Before the strings go on, a great little hack is I lubricate the bridge and the nut with graphite using just any basic number 2 pencil. Just sharpen it and draw a little into each groove where the string lays. This helps ensure that the string doesn't catch, which can lead to tuning issues and strings breaking. Now for a Les Paul and really almost any hardtail bridge guitar, a popular method is wrapping the string around the tailpiece. This does a few things. First, it makes the string tension a little easier. The strings have more give to them. This has to do with the break angle at the bridge being a less severe degree. Plus, if you lower the tailpiece down as far as it'll go so it sits against the body of the guitar, you get increased sustain out of the instrument. Now, they say the less severe break angle leads to less strings breaking as well, but I don't really break that many strings anyway. Almost all of my strings I replace before they break because they start to sound dead. So I've experimented with it and I like the feel versus the traditional way, so this is what I do with my Les Paul. So I feed the string backwards through the tailpiece, bend them up and over the top. To wind the strings around the tuning post, first I line it up, feed it through, and I give myself roughly the distance to the next tuning post of slack. That'll be enough to get it sufficiently around the post without wrapping it a million times. Then I pull it back through and bend a right angle at the length I measured. This keeps the string at the amount of slack I want while I turn the tuning gear. Now it's very important to have a nice clean spiral around the tuning post. If the string is layering over itself, it's not going to be stable, which can cause it to randomly go out of tune. So the key is pressing the string against the headstock while you turn. And a trick I learned years ago that really seems to work is I lock the string down by wrapping the string over the loose end once and then the rest under. This effectively pinches the end of the string and gives it a little extra security if you're paranoid about this stuff like I am. So we do the next string the same way, feed it through. Excess is the distance to the next post. Bend it, let the loose end of the string go under the inside once, and then for the rest of the turning, just hold the string against the headstock. Repeat this with all 6 strings. I tune the guitar up to pitch. Usually I tune it about a half step above that because next we're going to stretch the strings out. We have to break them in a little bit. So I just pull on them for a second. I also like to fret halfway up the neck, helps the string get settled. Stretching the strings out will lower the pitch. This is why I tune a little high at first. Then I get it in tune again, cut off the excess string length, and that guitar is good to go. I do the exact same process minus the wraparound bridge on my Dan Electro Baritone. Unfortunately, they do not make baritone guitar string sets in cobalt, so I had to get a 7-string set and just have an extra high E for emergencies. Like I said, stringing up this guitar is basically identical to the last one. Next up is the Jazzmaster. I'm actually going to use 9s on this guitar. I don't know why, maybe the longer end-to-end length of the string on this guitar, but the guitar feels a little stiffer than my others, so I compensate with a lighter string. I like it because it forces me to play a little differently. After the requisite taking off the old strings, cleaning, lubricating, we put the new strings on. Now, this guitar has vintage tuners which work a little different. Instead of a horizontal hole to feed through, the string goes in vertically top down. So I'm going to measure 2 posts past where the string is going, one for the distance vertically down into the post and another for wrapping around the post. I cut the string where I measured to. This is nice, I don't have to worry about cutting it off later. I feed the string down, bend a right angle, and start turning. The once over rest under trick doesn't apply here because there's not a string end to pinch, so just hold the string down and wrap it clean. Repeat this process with all 6 strings. Remember 2 post distance this time. Tune, stretch, tune, and done. Next up is the Gretsch. This guitar has a Bigsby bridge which comes with its own quirks. First up, I'm putting 11s on this guitar even though it lives in E standard tuning. This is because for whatever reason, on this guitar at least, the Bigsby doesn't really like any guitar gauge lighter than 11. I've had a lot of tuning issues on this guitar until I tried 11s and have had no issues since. So that's what I use on this guitar, and again, it's a different feel, which makes me play differently, which is cool. Now, Bigsby bridges are notorious for being a nightmare to change strings on, but I know the secret to doing it with ease: a capo. First, I take the ball end, give it a slight bend. This helps because we're doing a wraparound like on the Les Paul, and I have to hook the ball end on these little posts. So I go under, then over, and back under to hook the ball end on the post. Now pull the string up to the headstock somewhat taut, then capo somewhere in the middle of the neck. This will keep the string in place on the bridge while you do your work on the headstock. Genius. We're going to do our tried and true method. To the next post worth of slack, right angle bend, 1 over, rest under, hold the string against the headstock to ensure a clean spiral, take the capo off, and tune to pitch. Repeat this process with the rest of the strings, and we have restrung a Bigsby. And finally, the bass. Nothing new or different here, just bass strings. You might notice my gloves are now yellow from fretboard oil, and whether from corrosion or getting accidentally cut on a string, the left thumb tore open on the gloves, but we soldier on. Clean the fretboard, lubricate the bridge and the nut. These are vintage style tuners, so I measure 2 posts distance and cut to length, feed down into the post, bend, hold against the headstock, and turn. Tune, stretch, tune, and we are completely done. Thanks for your help, Penelope. All right, that does it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe for more videos on the way. I'm Jason. Love you guys.